We're going to jump right in. Thank you all for making the time to connect with us. Want to just give a bit of a voiceover on some housekeeping. So first of all, we're going to be sharing several links today, and so please make note of that. You will have a few more polls pop up, and then we'll have opportunities for you to engage through a QR code if you are seeking more information. We are also recording this webinar, and so it's important for you to know that this is a webinar that we want to make available to folks who may not be able to attend right now and want to make sure that they can view this recording. You can also access the application, and again, I'll show you the QR code a bit later, but if you want access to the application, I believe it's also going to be in the chat for those of you who are interested. Most important thing we'd love for you to know is that you should engage in this as a conversation. We're going to be sharing a lot of information with you, but we want to hear your questions. And so please leverage the chat. Alexander Han, who is on the call and on our team, will be monitoring the chat to make sure that if there are questions that come up, we answer them. Here are a few objectives for today's webinar. Number one, we are going to review with you the post-secondary leadership series. And this is essentially the work, the partnership work that you have heard about, and hopefully that's the information that you've got to date is really what allowed you to enter this space and to want to learn more. We will explain to you what you can expect as a OneGoal partner as part of this partnership with ISBE, and we'll walk through the process of applying for the OneGoal District Partnership Program. And again, this is intended to be much more conversational, and so even though you'll be hearing from a lot of speakers over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we do encourage you to jump in and to ask questions along the way. I'll start off by just introducing the folks that you're going to hear from. First and foremost, myself. My name is Patty Diaz-Andrade, and I'm the Chief Impact Officer here at OneGoal. I've been with OneGoal for about 6.5 years, and over the past 3 years, have had the opportunity to really oversee the work that we will be launching with ISBE, as early as next week, hopefully. In addition to that, you will hear from Alexa Charsha and Michelle Chapman, who are both partners to us in Elgin U46. Alexa is the lead counselor at Elgin, and Michelle is the director of post-secondary success at Elgin. They will be introduced by Andrew Schmitz, who is sitting here next to me and who is our managing director of secondary partnerships at OneGoal. He will share a bit about the work that he's done with Michelle and Alexa and give you a sense for what this partnership might look like on the ground. And the person who will kick us all off is actually Jennifer Kirmes, who is the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning at ISBE, and who has been a partner to us as we thought about what it might look like to bring OneGoal's services to districts across the state. And so we're excited to have all of our presenters here. And again, please leverage the chat to ask questions as they share a bit about their experience and the work that they've done with OneGoal. So with that, I will toss it over to Jen, who will kick us off by framing a little bit about the current reality in Illinois.
Thank you, Patty, and thank you to everyone for being here with us this morning. I'm Jen Kirmes. I am the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning at ISBE, and I just wanted to take a couple of brief minutes to share some context about what led ISBE to engage in this partnership with OneGoal. We know that planning for the successful transition for students between high school and post-secondary opportunities is incredibly difficult and complex work that requires tremendous resources. And this is especially true when you begin to think about students who have historically been excluded or not had equal access to post-secondary opportunities, and in particular to post-secondary educational opportunities. And so as you look at some of the realities, as Patty said, in the data on this slide, through an equity lens, as we are trying to do as much as possible and more here at the State Board of Education, you do see that there is a real need for us to deliver increased resources, increased support in a very targeted way. And so these disproportionalities in the data have existed for as long as we have had data, and COVID has only exacerbated gaps that we knew existed prior to the pandemic, and post-secondary enrollment overall in Illinois. And so many months ago, we began thinking, what can we do as a state to provide better support to schools and districts who really would benefit most from some additional resources in terms of supporting students with post-secondary planning and access. And so the partnership that you are going to hear more about today is the result of those conversations and deliberations, all of which, most importantly, are rooted in our commitment to equity, which for us means that ensuring that every student has access to the supports and resources they need to be successful. So next slide, please. So the Illinois State Board of Education and OneGoal are partnering together, as I said, to offer a select group of districts and schools within those districts with what we think is a really tremendous opportunity to build capacity, to impact students right now, and to build systems and structures that we think will really be a benefit and pay dividends for years to come. So we are just thrilled at the State Board of Education to be partnering with OneGoal and to be supporting OneGoal in this work. And we are excited to hear from all of you about your needs and how we can really tailor and adapt this program to do what is best for the students of Illinois. So again, thank you everyone for being here. And with that, I'll turn it back over to our partners at OneGoal.
Thank you, Jen. Really appreciate it. So before we move into the next slide, we want to hear from you all. And some of you have already submitted responses to this question that we'll ask you next within the application that you've submitted. So thank you. But we'd love to hear, what are some of the challenges that you face in supporting students post-secondary transitions and pathways? And you'll see a poll pop up. We've pre-populated some of those responses based on what we know from our partners and what we've heard from you. But we'd love to do a little bit of a check with this audience to hear from you. What are those challenges? Okay, so we've gotten most of those responses from you all. Thank you. Not surprisingly, the top reason, the top challenge rather, is a lack of time. And that is something that I'll tell you we've heard time and again, but not far behind that are mindset and resources and other. And so for those of you who selected other, if you wouldn't mind either coming off mute or putting into the chat, what are some of these other challenges that feel really present as you think about supporting young people into post-secondary? And Sarah, you asked a question, are you looking from the counselor's point of view or from students? I'd say from your point of view, the challenges that I, as a counselor, see or face in supporting young people, Sarah. So I'm seeing lack of partnership exposure in the chat. Time and resources. Opening the door to vocational opportunity. There seems to be a real focus on college as the only pathway, and that's something we've heard for sure. And then the access to post-secondary due to location, and that is very real. The geographic constraints can feel very real for many of our students. So all of this, I'll just name, really resonates with the OneGoal team. And it's part of the reason why this team that we have at OneGoal was stood up to really think about a more holistic approach to post-secondary advising that leverages the skills already within schools and districts and then provides them with the resources, helps them understand how to allocate time, et cetera. And so that's what we're gonna spend the next 10, 15 minutes discussing. So I'm gonna jump right in, but again, use the chat to ask questions. So OneGoal was founded in Chicago, and our focus over the last couple of years has been a classroom model. And so if you're familiar with the Chicago model, you will know that our students participate in the OneGoal program junior and senior year and access curriculum that supports them through post-secondary. But our work as part of this team over the past 3 years has also been about offering more flexible and impactful partnerships to meet school and district needs so that we are much more effective in equitably supporting students. And so what does that mean? It means that we pursue this work through a dual track strategy. The first is building the capacity of adults, of multiple adults in the system. If you're a counselor on this call, you probably are very familiar with the reality that often, not always, but often, counselors are the folks who are responsible for advising young people into post-secondary. And that's on top of everything else that our counselors do. And so that first track really is about supporting school and district leaders to access and to assess their current post-secondary readiness so that they are building the capacity of multiple adults who engage with young people, and they are effectively advising those young people into post-secondary. It's really this idea of redistributing the responsibility of post-secondary success across the system and doing it in a way that's intentional and impactful. In addition to that, because we know that our core work is the most impactful lever for improving student outcomes is within schools and is within teachers, our classroom model is that second track. And so we continue, and through this partnership, we'll continue to deliver the junior and senior year curriculum to students who are most in need of accessing post-secondary advising. And it's through those two approaches over the life of this partnership that we believe we will have a transformative impact on post-secondary outcomes across the state of Illinois. I'm going to spend the next few minutes digging into that first track so that you really get a sense for what it is that this partnership would provide you. And so I'll begin with the very first track, the very first component of that track, which is assess. In partnering with OneGoal, one of the first things that you will do is assess your current reality. You will use a rubric that OneGoal has developed and that is endorsed by the National College Access Network to really think about how your district, how your community, how your school is supporting young people into and through post-secondary and whether or not that's equitable. And so in addition to that rubric, you'll be accessing resources that help you understand from other districts what successful post-secondary strategy looks like, and you'll be marrying those resources with real analytics. This work will help you understand post-secondary success across 7 dimensions in this rubric, and this visual gives you a sense for what those dimensions are. But a core component of that is thinking about whether or not you as a system have a shared vision for post-secondary success, and whether or not that vision is understood by everyone, whether the data systems that you have within your district support your understanding of progress against that vision, and how you think about aligning, for example, that vision with the types of investments that you're making from a human resource and time standpoint. And so these are the 7 dimensions. We can obviously go into more detail on exactly what these look like, but wanted to start there because in order for us to know where we're going, right, we have to have a clear sense of where we are. And that is the foundational work that you would engage with one of your coaches, with your OneGoal coach, which I'll talk about in a minute, as part of this partnership. As you're doing that work of assessing, you'll also be participating in these monthly leadership coach sessions where a OneGoal coach, someone who is an expert in the space of post-secondary, who understands system level change and who understands how to advise adults to think about the types of levers that are possible at a system sort of altitude. Those coaches will be meeting with your district team on a monthly basis and providing a customized coaching plan in order for you to have a clear sense of how you are progressing against your goals. That month-to-month coaching is critical because in addition to that coach working with you, you also become a part of a larger community. And so again, the idea here with this 2-year partnership is that multiple districts across the state who have similar needs to you in your post-secondary efforts are working together, and we're developing a cross-district community of practice led by that coach that is helping you understand the types of improvements that are possible because you're experiencing them not only in your own district, but you might be seeing them with peer districts that are in a similar situation. All of that work comes together and sort of we created this visual to sort of help you think about it. It is in some ways cyclical, right? Because we know that the cycle of continuous improvement sort of reinforces itself. You are, at the same time that you are assessing your work or that you have assessed your work, you're thinking about how you will participate in this cross district community of practice as part of the assemble piece. And you are getting that monthly coaching from this OneGoal coach as part of the advanced piece. Guided, the little piece that you see in the middle, is a partner to us that helps us do a lot of the analytic report. And so if you're not familiar with them, they have a pretty robust data platform where we work with your team to upload district data, to match it to National Student Clearinghouse data, and to really get a sense for what your post-secondary patterns look like, so that as you're developing that individualized and customized coaching plan, that data and what you're seeing in the data are at the root of your plan. I spoke a lot, and so I'm going to pause because I just shared with you all sort of the 3 key components of this first year of partnership, and I want to make sure that I'm addressing any questions you might have about them. So I'm going to look at the chat, but if you want to come off of mute and speak, you can also do that. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, which is completely fine. Maybe some of them will come up. What I'll do now is toss it over to Andy, who will introduce our work with Elgin U46.
Yep, so our team has had the privilege to get to work with Elgin U46 over the last year and a half. And we've been able to pursue the dual track strategy that Patty mentioned earlier with them, which is both implementing our classroom model at one of their high schools and getting to work with Alexa and Michelle, who are 2 of the leaders in Elgin around their district post-secondary readiness. A lot of our time has been spent, as Patty mentioned earlier, thinking about how the district can support the school-based teams to do post-secondary work at a really high level at their sites. And so I'm going to toss it over to Alexa and Michelle, if she's here, to tell you a little bit more about their work.
Thanks, Andy. So I think I'm on my own today. So again, my name is Alexa Charsha. I'm the lead counselor for School District U46 in Elgin. A little bit about who we are. We are a pre-K through 12th grade school district. So we have over 37,000 students. Over 61% of our students qualify for free reduced lunch. You can see that we serve a wide population of students, and they're very diverse, with over half of our students identifying as Hispanic. And then we have a dual language program, and 35% of our students are English language learners. I'll just switch to the next slide, Andy. So a little bit about how our post-secondary support structure works. So myself and Michelle Chapman, who is our Director of Post-Secondary Success for the district, we are the district leads for our post-secondary work. We sit in district office, and we work with our 5 comprehensive high schools and our 1 alternative high school to develop their post-secondary teams. So each of our high school has their own post-secondary team that's comprised of administrators, teachers, counselors, and then each of those teams has a administrative lead as well as a teacher counselor lead, who's a part of our teacher union as well. And then we also work with our community college to help support our post-secondary work, as well as we've been really lucky to work with OneGoal and Andy throughout the last year and a half to support this work. So we work with our district-wide post-secondary meetings. We have about those more or less quarterly throughout the year, with schools working independently in their own post-secondary teams in between that. And then we work with their leadership in between those meetings as well. So there's tons of meetings going on, and we are always looking for ways to make sure that we're supporting the work across the district. You want to hop on? So some of the reasons that we started thinking this, really emphasizing this work across our district, we were hearing from students, right? So we get our different data reports that students have been able to tell us that they didn't feel that everyone was, helping them with planning for life after graduation. They didn't think that all students were being encouraged to go to college. We didn't see our enrollment data through National Clearinghouse. We didn't see that it was where we wanted it to be, as well as seeing those discrepancies that I know many of you are probably seeing within your own student groups. And then, as always, and I think we already talked about this, but there's limited resources across the district. And then we also saw across our 6 high schools, inconsistency on how students were being supported, inconsistency in language about how we are helping students, and what the roles are with different key players in the student's life. So since we've really started to do this work, we have started to see some changes. Not to say that we still don't have a lot to do, but we have started seeing that our students or our teams are seeing that there's an awareness that students should have a post-secondary plan and that everyone should be involved in that, including our teachers. I know one of the biggest impacts data that we get every year is we ask students, who has the biggest impact on helping you plan for life after high school, and consistently students, say teachers. So we've emphasized making teachers a part of our plan and working with them. We've been starting to work with our curricular areas and our counselors to make sure that we are incorporating post-secondary work into our curriculum throughout the year. We're part of the school improvement plans now. Really making sure that we're having that common language throughout our school, and that we're, as teachers, as school counselors, as administrators, that we're sending like the same message to all of our students and families, and really taking a minute to look at our data and seeing where we need to make improvements, and where changes can be made for our students. Really looking at whole school implementation of helping students, and not just those ones that show up in the counselor's office every day, but those students, that maybe don't know to reach out for help or ask questions, making sure that we are reaching out to them, making sure that we're supporting each of those students. We're really working on getting post-secondary and 7th through 12th grade curriculum. We're currently working with our senior English right now to work that in, and with plans to kind of work backwards and make sure that post-secondary is supported throughout English through all those years. Again, just making sure students are knowing that they can count on other staff within the building to answer questions or at least direct them to the right resources. And really looking at students knowing where they can go for help, and figuring out, if there's a barrier in my way, how do I get past that? Who can support me? Who are my, people within my building that can really help me figure out what I want to do once I become a high school graduate. And then really we're looking at all students are starting to be able to articulate their post-secondary plans. So it's not just, I don't know, I just want to graduate, but actually being able to, tell us what their plan is and those action steps in order to make sure that they can fulfill those plans.
Thank you so much, Alexa, for sharing a little bit about Elgin. I'll just make 2 quick points, and then I'll turn it over to Patty to talk a little bit about our timeline. I think one point that Alexa made that is really important is one, Elgin's focus on supporting all students equitably and really paying attention to particular student priority groups, students who aren't just the first in line at the counselor's office to ask about their post-secondary plans, but making sure that all students have access to different personnel, time, resources to help them make their choices for post-graduation. And two, really supporting schools to make post-secondary success work, not just one more thing. We know school leaders are overwhelmed and have an endless to-do list. And so just asking them to do one more thing to start a FAFSA completion night isn't necessarily going to be what leads to sustainable change. Michelle and Alexa have really worked to empower and support schools to integrate this work into their already existing strategic plans, which I think has been a real sign of progress. So I'll turn it back over to Patty to talk a little bit more about our timeline.
Yeah, and actually, before I go there, I see that there are some questions in the chat, so I'm going to pop it up just to see, and I'll start at the top. Questions. What is the time commitment for a partnership with ISBE and OneGoal, and how does OneGoal define post-secondary? So the time commitment is actually something that I don't remember if the slides before had this, but let me come back. No, we removed them. We can share this with you, but I would say, do you want to switch that, Andy?
Sure, and we'll just say it's in the PDF version of the application where it will kind of tell you exactly what you should expect from a time commitment standpoint, and we're also happy to talk about that in more depth with interested leaders. But roughly speaking, we ask for a handful of hours each month, right? 3 to 5 hours each month from a district leadership team. That might also be school-based in districts where there's just 1 or 2 high schools to do this type of one-on-one team coaching work, and then to also participate in our cross-district communities of practice.
Yeah. So if you look at the deck, you'll see at the very bottom each of these components, right? So the assessment piece, as Andy mentioned, about an hour to a month. But then in addition to that, you're going to have monthly sessions with your coach. And so that will depend really on where you are on your journey and what you and your coach agree is most important for you in order to achieve your vision. And then beyond that, we will have these like cross-district sessions. There are 6 sessions a year, and those 6 sessions happen every 2-ish months where you're coming together to receive more of your standard professional development. And they're on topics like match and fit, or what the FAFSA process is, how to think about advising young people on personal statements. So really building the knowledge base of folks in a school and in a district to be able to support young people. In terms of the cost, that's actually something that we discussed as part of this webinar. So the cost of the leadership series is $35,000 per year per district. And through this partnership, ISBE will fund the first 2 years of the program. Beyond the 2 years, we've listed out for you ways that districts have in the past paid for these types of services. And so they'll leverage Title I or Title II funding. And in some cases, we work with districts to identify local philanthropy that might support this work.
And Patty, one of the other questions we saw was, how does OneGoal define post-secondary, if you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so I would say that when I started at OneGoal 6.5 years ago, we had a pretty narrow definition. So it's consistent with something that we saw earlier around the challenges, which is that folks were defining post-secondary as college or bust. I want to stop the screen share so that I can see you all. So let me see if I can do that. There we go. And what we learned is that we were sending students into post-secondary pathways that were, sort of this 4-year track, and they weren't succeeding because they weren't invested. They were very clear that the 4-year path was not for them. And we didn't have a way of advising young people 6 years ago into what to do in those situations and how to think about alternative pathways. And I will say that about 4 years ago, we reoriented our strategic direction and have been much more inclusive about progressive and alternative pathways. And so today, the way that we define post-secondary success is inclusive of 2- and 4-year institutions, but it's also inclusive of market relevant credentials and high quality certification programs that put young people on the path to economic freedom, because this is really what this work is about, is ensuring that at the end of this graduation, whether that's a 2-year degree, 4-year degree, or some type of certification, you, young person, are able to have economic stability. And so that's how I would answer that question. There was another question, how does OneGoal compare with equal opportunity schools? We have been an EOS school and I am seeing a lot of overlap. EOS is a real friend to us. I'm actually going to hang out with Sasha and a few of the other leaders tomorrow at a event that is being hosted virtually. What I would say is that our focus is post-secondary success, period. And so all of our training, all of our professional development, all of our student-facing curriculum is about equipping those students to be successful in their post-secondary pathway. The piece that I didn't speak about, which is the classroom model, and that's intentional because these first 6 to 8 months are really about assessing the system and being a partner to you as you think about your big picture post-secondary strategy. But beginning in fall of 22, so about a year from now, a number of our partners will move into implementing the classroom model. That classroom model is delivered junior and senior year to students, and the curricula is really intended to do a couple of things. Number one, to build the knowledge of young people so that they understand what their options are, so that they aren't just being told it's a 4-year degree or bust, right? That they truly understand what their interests are and how those then manifest themselves into different post-secondary choices. The second is supporting them through the tactical steps of applying to post-secondary programs and enrolling in them. And so we have our program spans through the first year of post-secondary, which means that we have specific strategies for addressing summer melt. And those students who are participating in the OneGoal program are able to enroll in their post-secondary pathway much more seamlessly than we've seen for students who are not part of the OneGoal program. In that first year of post-secondary, we also have supports so that students are meeting certain milestones that we know are important to ensure persistence and completion. And so these are things like ensuring that young people are attending professors' office hours, that they are parts of study groups, right? That they are taking the quote unquote right number of courses if they need to, so that they're not overwhelming themselves in that first year. And so those are the sort of tactical milestones that we monitor in that first year of post-secondary, so that this isn't just about enrolling them and sort of saying, okay, we're done, good luck, but rather ensuring that those students are able to persist through that first, second, or third, and fourth year. And so, again, I'll just emphasize that for these first 2 years, this ISBE partnership is providing the financial support to implement not just the system level professional development work that will kick off, as soon as we close out the application next week, but also the classroom model. So this first cohort of juniors that would start in fall 22 would be included as part of this partnership, and ISBE would cover the cost of that program. Any other questions? And obviously, please come off of mute if you would like to ask it and you don't want to put it in the chat. Okay, I'm going to go back and just share with you all the general timeline and again remind you of sort of what you can expect. So this is just an overview of the next couple of months. We are in the process of inviting districts. As Jen mentioned, these are specific districts that we've invited. So it's not like, it is in a sense open to everyone, but we're prioritizing a certain number of districts, and you all on this call would be a part of that prioritization list. So we're inviting you all to apply. We will close out the application next Tuesday. So November 22nd is the deadline. And then at that point, we will announce shortly thereafter the districts that will constitute the first cohort of this partnership. And so our expectation is that given the holidays, we would match you to your coach before we go off on holiday break so that you know who that is and you've had your first meeting. But then in January is when a lot of the monthly coaching session, the deep assessment of your current state against our rubric, and then goal setting would begin to take off. You'd also around February start to meet across your district cohort so that you get to know what other districts are partnering with you and will be a part of your community in a sense as you're engaging in this 2-year partnership. see a few chats. So let me go back to the chat. Actually, I think it's like the PDF version. The annual cost after the initial launch. That's a great question. So as I mentioned earlier, the annual cost for the sustained coach and the professional learning series is $35,000 a year. The cost of the classroom model is $27,000 a year. The last slide that I'll share with you all, and then I'll start my screen share and obviously invite you all to ask questions and we can have more of a dialogue. So last two slides. One, here's the QR code that I mentioned. And again, the application is also in the chat, but if you want to grab your phone right now and pull it up on your phone, here's a way to do that. You can also schedule a meeting with us. And so a few of you who are on this call have had an opportunity to connect with myself, with Andy, with others on the team to ask questions about your specific needs. And so if that's something that you're interested in doing, we're happy to do it either virtually or in person. And so you can just let us know what you feel most comfortable with. But the last piece that I'll share is just the overall timeline of this 2-year partnership. So we are now in fall 2021. We are, as I mentioned earlier, launching this professional development leadership series. Again, that includes the rubric self-assessment, the coach that you will get that's working with you on a monthly basis to develop a plan, monitor its progress, and then your involvement as part of a community of practice that includes multiple districts from across the state. That's happening now, and so we look to launch that in the next couple of weeks. And then in the spring is where we would start to identify the districts that will adopt the classroom model. We would work with you and your school leaders to understand whether or not this type of classroom model makes sense for your vision and how it might further your impact. The students would begin the classroom model in fall of 2022. And by the way, if you look at the top blue line, right, we're still continuing to do the coaching and the system level professional development. And then the intention is that by the fall of 23, there we start to have conversations about your options and whether or not you want to continue to work with OneGoal beyond the life of this 2-year partnership. So I'm going to stop my screen share and obviously open it up to have a discussion, to answer questions. If you all have specific questions for Alexa and her experience working with us, I'd invite you all to take advantage of this time. Okay, so there's a question here. How would you work with a small rural district with 1 district administrator and 1 guidance counselor? It sounds like a lot more time per month for the people who are already overloaded. And so I think I have 2 thoughts there, and Andy, you obviously should jump in. The first is that the customization of the coaching is critical here, right? Like your coach is going to work with you to understand what your needs are, how do you address those needs, and what that means in terms of a time commitment. And so that's the first place that I would start, is that really it's going to depend, how we work with you will depend on the work that you and your coach do to assess your current reality and where you want to be. I think the second piece that I would name is we have had experience across our different regions. So before joining this team, I launched our Massachusetts region, where we had several districts in Massachusetts that you would walk into the high school and that's where the superintendent's office was. And so I imagine that this is the type of scenario that we're going to see across some of our partners in Illinois. And so that idea of like working closely with the high school leader, with the superintendent, the small community that we're invested in, and really partnering to ensure that this isn't, as Andy said earlier, right, an add-on, but rather a supplement and something that facilitates your work. That's our guiding belief and our intention. And so whatever we can do to make sure that that's what's happening, that's the orientation that we take.
And the only thing I'd add to that is, as I know everybody on this call knows, right, to do good school improvement work, whether it's instructional focused or culture and climate focused, you need to build a team, you need to empower others. And so for schools that might have a smaller number of school leaders, we would work with that initial group of school leaders to identify others who could be a part of this team that the OneGoal coach would be working with, to therefore distribute some of this work of post-secondary success out across the school. So it doesn't just live with a one counselor, one high school principal, but is rather distributed across the school and across multiple adults.
And then Kurt, to answer your question in the chat, is it possible to just do the coaching model? Yes. Any other questions? And again, please come off chat or mute if you like. And it sounds like I have to unmute everyone. So let me do that, maybe. I don't think I know how to unmute you all. Okay, I'm sorry about that, you all. I don't know how to unmute you, but please feel free to add questions to the chat. Okay, well, we have one final poll for you, and then we're happy to hang out here and again answer questions through chat. And the final poll is just like a next action if you're interested at all in learning more. And so I'll invite Ninat on our team to send that poll. And so just let us know if there's like a desire to continue the conversation, and we're happy to follow up with you all. Either by emailing us, following that link on the QR, or Alexander, if you wouldn't mind putting your email into the chat so that folks have it. And that way you can email Alexander directly, who can be in touch with you. A huge thank you to Jen and Alexa for being on this call and for sharing your perspective and for being partners to us. And again, I'll hang out with Andy here if any of you have more questions, and would invite you to put them into the chat. But otherwise, we look forward to staying in touch. Okay, so I think we'll end the webinar. Jen and Alexa, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.